and welcome to the Storied Way Perspective with Rituparna, where I speak to storytellers, story believers, story makers, story shakers, and try and look at the world through their eyes to see how they look and how they influence the world through their stories. Not all of them are professional storytellers, but they're definitely story believers who help us look at the world, help us communicate with the world with the power of stories. Today, on the Storied Way Perspective, my guest is Richa Jha, a children's writer, editor, publisher, someone who I have looked up to for many, many years because, in many ways, she's the kind of storyteller I want to be. Particularly for the kind of perspective she brings into the children's stories that she writes and she publishes. There are lots of things that a child goes through in his or her life, emotions, feelings, experiences which don't find a place in the classroom, at home, or anywhere else. That's the kind of experience that you will find in Richa's books. Those are the kind of stories which children want to hear, which children want to experience, children want to talk about. That's what her books do. Open up any of Richa's books. She's got 15 titles, a great number to begin and add to your library if you don't have them already. Pick them up, open up any book published by Piccolio Books, and you will find a conversation that you can have with yourself and with the child in your house. I strongly recommend The Power of Stories and Storytelling to really begin conversations in the home because there are emotions, there are experiences in our life which we ignore, which we don't talk about, which we overlook, and we even repress. Nobody likes to be vulnerable. But in the books, it's particularly the children's books that Richa makes, you will find yourself being vulnerable, and it's all right to be vulnerable at times. So enjoy this conversation with Richa, and if you'd like to follow or know more about Richa and her work, all the links are there in the description below. All right. Hello and welcome to an episode of the Storied Way Perspective. I am joined by Richa Jha, and Richa is a very, 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 very dear friend who I have had the pleasure of knowing ever since I started off as a storyteller. And she's one of the most courageous people I've ever met in the field of storytelling. And she's somebody who I always go look up and seek what is Richa doing because she's fearless, she is courageous, she's adventurous. She doesn't care about the world, doesn't care about the fact that no, she cares a lot about the world. Actually, it's not right to say that she doesn't care about the world, but she does, doesn't care in the way that people will look at it in a way that she's just on by herself. But she cares so much about the world, and particularly a large part of the world, that she writes stories and creates stories about them. And she forces a lot of us to look at that part of the world differently. So Risha, thank you for agreeing to come on the Storied Way Perspective. I am very, very, very keen to look at you and try and understand, get inside your head and try and understand how do you look at the world? How do you look at the world of children's books? And how do you look at the world where there are children reading your books? What happens to them? Are you happy to be here today?
Of course. So Rituparna, before I begin, everyone, I sort of reciprocate every single word that Rituparna uttered just before she started with asking that last question, and reciprocate in exactly the same way. That is how exactly how I feel for Rituparna, and every single word, I'm echoing every single sentiment there. I mean, she's someone who's fearless. She's someone I admire. I mean, I look up to you, Rituparna, and you know that. I've said that.
Yes, I think we are a bit of a mutual admiration society right here.
We do.
So everybody should know that. But that's not what this chat is all about, because Richa tells me that yes, she did not ask for the questions, and that's what I respect about her. Even as an interviewer, I never like giving my questions away. But knowing Richa, I know she will take the questions head on and will answer from her heart. So I want everyone to listen to her answers and interpret them for whatever you understand out of her, because she's a genius right here. So let's begin. Like I said, you're one of the most adventurous, fearless storytellers I have ever met. What got you into becoming a storyteller, Richa, at least as far as children's storytelling is concerned?
So, Rituparna, I think I'm just trying to create many different worlds through my stories, which maybe subconsciously I feel I would have been happier having been part of as a growing up child. Okay, so maybe some part of me misses not having had those worlds to have inhabited in the various forms. So in the sense, I'll just tell you, I have a very weak memory, right? So there are almost every aspect of my childhood and my life thereon is sort of a complete blank. I don't remember too much about my growing up years, either as a very little child, a young child, or in my teenage years, or even college years. I don't remember. So there is, I think, one. Uh, you know, so we all of us try to imagine ourselves as having been a particular kind of child, or a combination of so many factors that make us up. Now, because I don't remember too much of my own self growing up, these are all, I feel, attempts to create a sense of self for myself, and a sense of my childhood through these. So, when I'm creating a strong character who's like asking a lot of questions, maybe it's me wondering if I were that child when I was growing up, or if I were not, I would have probably wanted to be that child. Okay, because now I know that maybe I didn't, as a growing up child, maybe I didn't question enough, is something that constantly keeps coming to my mind. That probably I didn't question enough. Probably I didn't ask. I used to think a lot about other things, I'm sure, but I never would sort of put it in words, express it, and ask, okay, why is it happening? If there's something happening which I don't like, I probably never made that effort to ask, and express my displeasure uh, very, very openly. So, those are the kind of things that I feel I find myself going back to now. So when I started writing, I probably didn't realize this is what I was doing. But as I'm moving on with more and more stories, I am realizing that, okay, subconsciously, that is exactly what my mind is now trying to do. It's trying to build up those many real stories that probably never happened to me. Okay, which I would have liked to happen to me, because they would have probably made me a stronger person today. So it's that. But a very superficial answer would be that at some point I felt, because I was like reading many, many, many picture books from all around the world, there was something in me that said, no, you can do it. And there were, again, suddenly you start getting all these stories coming up in your head, and you feel, okay, probably you can try it, because there is just that story. And I feel there are stories, as you keep saying, Rituparna, all the time, there are stories in all of us, inside all of us. And we all have a different ways of expressing it. And we do it even if we don't call ourselves storytellers in the professional sense. We are always telling stories. Listen to any conversation between two men, two women, two children. What else is it? Any form of expression is finally storytelling, because we decide how much of what we want to say gets omitted, what exactly we want to tell them. So each of us is actually constructing a kind of story when we are talking to even our best friend. So in that sense, what makes the professional storytellers a little different from the others is that we are very consciously trying to get all our thoughts together and pen it down together, or in the case of oral storytellers, you're able to express it in a different way. So at some point I felt that, okay, there were stories in me which probably weren't said the way I would have I wanted to say in India. You see, that was an important thing for me. I felt that there was a lack of a certain kind of picture books in India, which is maybe the plug, again, subconsciously, that I was trying to fill. Overtly, that thought never came to my mind that, oh, I'm going to be doing this, But I feel, again, from the choice of the stories that I was coming up with even earlier on, I felt that those stories weren't there in India at all at that time.
I completely agree with you, Richa. I completely agree with you, because that's what my two things which I'm leading towards is that in your books I find a very unique perspective. I find characters which I don't find in any books, whether in India or maybe some internationally, but not everybody is well traveled, well read, well equipped to find a good storybook. I mean, that finding a good storybook itself is a huge, immensely huge, challenging task for a lot of us, including storytellers and as parents. But in your book, I find a very distinct perspective and very unique characters. Like your characters, whether it's Unboy Boy, and I must tell everybody this little story that there was to be a festival in a school where a literature festival, and I was invited. It was a book week, and I asked them, "Do you want a book on a story from the oral tradition, or a story from a picture book, or a book published book?" And they said, "No, we would like it from a book, published book." So I took permission from Richa, and I told the story of the Unboy Boy. And while I told that story, it was grade 3. And there was a bunch of children up there sitting in an auditorium, and I could see them because the lights were on them. And I could see the story working on them while I'm telling it. And once the story is over, I asked them, "What do you think of this story?" Because you see, I do not know the writer. I'm going to go back and tell her what I felt, what you all tell me about it. So this boy who picked up his hand and he got up and says, "I am the Unboy Boy. I love ballet and I want to do ballet, but everybody tells me that it's a girl's thing to do." And if the story is about me, and his entire class clapped for him. That's what your stories do, Richa. Your stories actually tell children it's about you, it's about me. So the question is that there is if you're talking about a perspective, where do you get this perspective from? I mean, like you just said that yes, you were trying to put stories which you wish had happened to you and there, but this perspective is as true even today. So tell me about that.
I'm observing children all the time, and which starts from my own children when they were growing up, now that they are much older, and their interactions with other children, and so on. I've never been a teacher for very young children, so I can't say that I've spent a lot of time with a larger group of children in that sense. But yes, I have, through the interactions of my children with their peer and older children or whatever. There's a certain I have that little perceptiveness that goes into my observations. Therefore, I've realized that the mistake most adults make about children is that we feel that we don't credit them with the kind of emotional depth that we feel adults have and children don't have. The thing is that children have way more depth in them than we credit them with, and will ever acknowledge in them. So, and my thing is that there are only so many emotions in the world, and each of the emotions that we as adults feel, the child is feeling each of them, but in a far more pronounced way, because they are yet not able to express them fully. Maybe through words, they're feeling them, yes, but they may not have the right words to maybe express them yet. So if they are feeling betrayed, they may not know that feeling is betrayed. You see, if there's a third friend coming in between two friends, and one of the friends feels left out, that feeling is of being left out and feeling, okay, suddenly my best friend is no longer my best friend, but she's ending up doing a lot of things with her which she would do with me earlier, right? So there is definitely that sense of very, very strong betrayal that the child feels, but that term betrayal is that child still hasn't learned, right? So the emotions are all there, and the emotions children start feeling right from the day I think they are born, because as parents we end up doing a lot of cruel things with them without we realizing and they realizing. So you see, I just imagine them to be younger versions of what I am, okay, and that then makes it very easy for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to create a character purely out of imagination. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of it. Finally, it's fiction, so I'm trying to put. But, the moment I say that, okay, there's a child who'll feel exactly how I am feeling if I'm feeling let down by somebody, or if I'm feeling say, I'm feeling rejected by somebody, all these feelings are there. I know that because I've seen that happen with my children. in one context or the other. I know these are universal emotions and across age groups. So, I think that, so I'm not making very goody. I'm not dumping down emotions for them. So for me, the crux of the story is always an emotional core rather than the plot around. I mean, the plot just happens to be an embellishment, so to speak. It's that emotional core.
I completely align with the fact that you connect with the child's emotion and their emotional database, if I were to call it, which is not communicated back or not expressed back appropriately. They don't have the vocabulary for it. I tag your stories in all my workshops. I talk about children having needs, and if you find a story which answers their needs or it fulfills their need, you will be the best person out there. So find out what is the child going through. It's not about what you want to tell the child. It's about what the child is feeling at that point of time. And as true for parents as well, whether it's for a storyteller, for an educator, or for a parent, anyone working with children, any which way, I feel addressing the child and their needs are important. And I call them special needs. These emotional vacuum or these emotional, let's say, experiences which they are unable to handle or express appropriately, which they don't have a name for, like you rightly said, they become those little nails in their little hearts, which sort of tears at them every now and then. They don't know how to do it. And having that addressed is important. So I call this the special stories for special children. And every child is special, but there are the special needs in children which need to be addressed at the right time. Otherwise, it sort of makes a different kind of a child who grows up into a very different kind of an adult. And we have a panel on that, special stories for special children. And it's not about the ability or the inability or the disability of a child. It is about having that one child who will stand up and say, I am so and so. Now, can you tell me something about, how do parents, educators, storytellers understand the needs of the child? How can they really, truly address that gap? Because a lot of times we are trying to dictate to them, do this, do that, moralizing, lesson. Sometimes there's an academic concept also needs to be told. It's always the adults, I will call it the adult. The adults need to share something with the child. It's never the other way around. Your books open up conversations. So from your experience as a children's book writer, publisher, consumer, because you love children's books and as a children's book advocate, I would like you to give some tips to people. How can they use a story, maybe something from your book or something, any other book? How can they use a book story to have a conversation with the child and see what the child is going through?
Okay. Oh, wow. Lovely question. So let me start off with my experience as a parent. Okay, because for me, the true journey into picture books actually started from my picture book reading with my children. And I think it will probably answer some bit of this thing. Because you see, I started reading out to my older child when he was 3 or 4 months old. And we didn't have too many books around that time, picture books. This I'm talking about 21 years ago, right? So we didn't have too many picture books in India. Whatever little I could get, I would get for him. And then it so happened that we also moved out of India, where I had access to a lot of books and probably the very, very best in the world. So that was still the stage where he was not old enough to pick up books on his own. I mean, yes, he would sort of just go and pick up, but still, I would pick up books for him. And we would sit and we would start reading the books, right? And in the course of reading, and I would not shy away from picking up books which were difficult, So I remember there was a phase when my child was about 3 years old, and I picked up about 5 or 6 books which were on death, ranging from the death of a pet to a grandparent to a parent and so on, So they were different. And I was talking to a child who was just 3 at that time. And when we sat and we started talking about those books, so, at each page, I allowed for a lot of pauses. Okay. And I felt that those pauses were because my child felt that because I'm pausing in the middle of a story while reading out, the child felt encouraged to plug those pauses with his own thought. Okay. And the moment, and this was my first experience of handling a difficult sort of conversation with my child. Okay. So I would read a sentence and then just wait for him to absorb all the visuals on the page. Okay. And then maybe at times I would ask, what do you think is happening here? But mostly I would not ask, because I would allow the child himself to come up and say, Mom, I'm feeling a little bad about what's happening to this boy. Okay. And I would say, why do you think so? And he would say, I have a feeling the mother is going to die. That something like that, right? And there were times when I would, while reading, choke because the books were heavy. But I would not eat my tears, right? So I would let my child see that I'm getting emotional while reading a book. Okay. And I would say, okay, I'm feeling bad. I think I'll just need a minute because I'm feeling sad and I want to cry. Right. And my child would, sort of just pat me and say, Mom, it's okay. I'm also feeling bad. So we can cry together. I'm feeling heavy now when I'm talking about it, because all of this has happened with me. Okay. So the moment I'm allowing space for that conversation, like I've already opened up that conversation without even asking, do you think what is happening to the child is fair, unfair? What will the child learn from it, not learn from it? Whether we should have wars? No, nothing like that. It's just the child expressing himself, and later on my daughter expressing herself. And as an adult, if we are attuned rather to what they are offering as way of expressing, we immediately know what their needs are. Okay, so in that moment, if the child were to say, Mom, I feel we shouldn't have wars, for instance, then I know that the child's need is not so much immediate personal, maybe reassurance, but the child is looking for a larger reassurance from the world around him. You understand? It's like, therefore, he feels that he's secure in his mother's love or the father's love. So he's not feeling insecure that the mother will go away somewhere, but he's concerned more about the outside thing. So there's empathy for the larger world, feeling very secure in his family thing yet, right? So, we are just by listening to children is how we understand what their needs are.
Yeah.
Because the moment we quieten, we stop talking and we start listening, is when we are able to understand what's going on inside their mind. And there is no other way of getting to know them, really. If we ask questions, we will never get the answers to those.
Yeah.
Because the child, they are far more adept at hiding their own emotions, or, if they don't want to say, they will just not say. But if we allow that space for them to just express it on their own, that is where their needs. Suppose they've had a tough time, like this Susu Pals thing. I mean, it's a little autobiographical because it's also my cousin and I, like, we were really like thick bum chums and all that. So it's that. But it's also my daughters. I could see how torn she was when something like this happened to her, a third person coming into her life, in between the two friends, right? And I didn't have to ask her. I didn't have to go and hug her and say, oh my God, I know you're feeling bad and all that, because I know that would have immediately, shrink her away from me, because children don't like being, nobody likes to be discovered in a
vulnerable state. In a
vulnerable state, right? But so I didn't do any of that. I was just there to observe what she's going through with her friend, right? And maybe just sit there. And one day, if she walks in and says, I'm feeling very, very sad, that's about it. Okay, and I want to tear away my doll and throw it away. Something like that she had said. So I knew there was anger, and therefore I knew that her need at that time is getting her to feel that, okay, she's loved, even if one friend has moved on from her. So, those are the kind of things. So, but the moment we put too many words between us and our children, I think we just end up spoiling it.
Yeah. It's also about rationalizing, about let them figure it out for themselves. We want to doctor them with all our own vocabulary. It's all right to
Yes.
say that, you know what you're feeling is this. But now that you're feeling this, let's try and solve it. Let's try and do this. Let them
And let's have an exercise around it. Let's have
around
something
it.
this. So
Yeah,
it just ruins it
it
completely.
just ruins it complete. It's all right to feel a negative emotion. It's all right. We as parents, as adults, we don't want our children to go through betrayal. We don't want them to go through a heartbreak of any kind. But our job is to really let them be, let them experience it, and let them find their means and mechanism to deal with that. And that's what I think a story, which is not your own, but you see it read it in a book, sort of lets you see that, okay, what are my choices? Can I do it myself? Do I need help? Uh, my theory about stories and storytelling is that we all live one life. There are only as many experiences we can have in this lifetime. But the moment you consume stories, you get to live another life. Like Richa is putting her life into her, the imaginary life that she must have led. She's putting them into her books. I think each one of us, when we read a book, when we watch a film, we are also leading that life for that particular moment. And in that thing, you sort of make those beautiful correlations about those very emotions that you felt, and how you reacted, and what was your coping mechanism? How similar or dissimilar is it with that character? And whether you agree with it. And sometimes, an emotion which was not really expressed adequately, that gets released. That trauma, that pain, that emotion which was never answered or addressed. You didn't do it yourself because you repressed it. It gets addressed. I'll use that as a hook to go to my next question, Richa, which is, I know you like me, or rather, I'm like you. Me, like you, also recommends children's books to a lot of adults. I say that please read children's books. Your perspective about yourself will change. I write it in my official bio that I discovered the child in me the moment I started telling stories to children, and I've solemnly promised I will never ever grow up again. And I hold that, growing up, adulting is overrated. Being a child, you're more spontaneous, you are more authentic, you're honest. And I think that's what is very, very important. And a lot of children's book makers are actually capturing that life in those books. So, question to you, Richa, is what happens to adults when they consume stories, especially children's stories?
They discover complete worlds between those. So let me talk about just the picture books for the moment. I think they discover complete worlds in each of those books. So each of those books is like a universe which has a whole range of emotions going about them, and this I'm talking about well-made picture books. And it suddenly helps you identify with those feelings as well as a child. I feel they help you help an adult also identify with everything that's going on in the books just as well as a child would do. Because I'm going back to the first thing that I said, that finally we are all made of emotions, and all these emotions are sort of universal, and they're age agnostic. So the same element, it's like, I keep talking about this book, The Rabbit, the rabbit said or something. The Rabbit Listened. Beautiful book. Recent release, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The Rabbit Listened. And I feel it's one of the best books I have seen about offering your, just the fact that you are there with a friend. There has not been a better way of expressing it across literature anywhere in the world. But it's there in that book. It's just a child feeling very, very sad and upset and angry and frustrated because the building blocks that he was building, a crow has come and just crumbled up the whole thing. So you have the boy feeling sad about his own, frustrated, and all these people are coming. So there are all kinds of animals coming and trying to offer gyan to the child that, you should do this, you should do that. Throw a tantrum or go hit it, and all kinds of things are coming from the other animals, but the child does not want any of those. And here comes a rabbit who just quietly comes and sits next to that child without a word, without speaking a single word, and the child feels the warmth of the body of the rabbit next to him. And the story moves on to how the child finally opens up. Okay, the rabbit is not there to offer any kind of gyan, advice. What as adults we are doing that to people around us all the time. You have your best friend looking down, you have your parents not feeling well, you have your spouse partners not feeling whatever, and we come up with a whole list of things. You should do this, you should do that. Have we ever even tried to listen to people just by being there? Just be there. The person may not be wanting to talk at all yet. When it will be the right time for the person, he or she will open up. Okay, but we want solutions. We want to be either the solution, or we want to offer solutions, or we want to be the route to whatever happiness. I mean, all kinds of things. It's always about us.
Always, or we sort of get into that story and say, what, this happened to me.
Yes.
And this is what I did. So learn from me. Yes. Oh my God, I call it the story jacking syndrome. You want to hijack everyone's story and it happened to me.
Exactly. So which is what? So a brilliant book like that will tell us that no, there are moments when a person just needs your presence. That's it. Nothing else. So you see, that's a very powerful thought. It's a book for a 4-year-old child or 3-year-old child. As a 47-year-old woman, I am able to, and that's something maybe I may not have recognized had I not seen that book. So there are so many aspects of ourselves that we discover in each of those books if we read them carefully. We have to have that ability to read them as proper books and not as merely, children's books ki ha aaya gaya hawa mein and all that. If we allow ourselves to feel what's happening in the pages, there will be a lot that we will be taking for ourselves from those books. And each of those is going to make us into stronger, better parents, better, stronger human beings, just better friends overall in this world. And each of those books is doing that. Those good picture books.
A lot of your books do that, Richa. I must tell you that your books are soul food for adults, because they are as much for adults. And if you go to Richa's site, you will see that she says we make book for all ages. But if you scroll down, you will see that they are actually picture books. So then your adult brain will say, "Arey, ye to छोटे बच्चों वाली किताबें हैं, बहुत सारे pictures हैं, where are the novels, where are the stories, or whatever else that you like to read." But if you open the cover of any pickle book, you will see that the book is talking to you. No matter who you are, what you do, what age, where you're from, the book is meant for you, and it sort of will tug at an emotion which you have felt at some point of time and may have ignored it, overlooked it, never addressed it, never acknowledged it. It's right there in those books. And that's why I love your way of telling stories. They heal, Richa. They actually heal.
Thank you so much for
you
saying that, Rituparna. Oh gosh, I'm feeling a little emotional, okay? So
I would like to give you a virtual hug. Things are opening up, and I wish we could meet in person and do a little coffee session while doing this chat and interview. But that's what the Storied Way is all about, trying to bring to you unique storytellers like Richa, and to hear from them and see how do they look at the world of stories and storytelling. And there's a lot that we can understand by just consuming children's stories and not looking at they are perhaps written for children, in the first instance, or they're packaged and they are sold in the market as children's books. But like I said, it's a beautiful piece of literature which speaks to everyone. Pick up any children's book and you will look at the world differently, look at yourself differently, only if you are willing to be vulnerable and honest with yourself. Yeah, you agree with that?
Thank you for putting it. I'll never be able to say it the way you do it, Rituparna, but yes, that's exactly how it is. Thank you. Yes.
All right. So thank you so much, Richa, for coming and doing this chat with me. I've had a great, fantastic beginning to the day, and I hope you're feeling good.
I'm feeling good. This is the best possible way to start my day now here. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Rituparna.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye. All right.
And yes, going back to my admiration for you, that yes, coming from you, and I'm so glad you're doing this entire series.